Good evening, gamers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Games with Dave. Tonight, I have the pleasure of being joined by one of my newest friends, a great game designer and an awesome pal, John McGuire from Ham and Egg Publishing.
Hey,
Hey, how's it going, buddy? Um, John had, with his partner, has created a amazing game system, 321 Action. You can check it out at 321actiongames.com. But yeah, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for
hey,
coming on.
thanks for having me, man. I'm thrilled to be here.
So, 321 Action, I'm not going to lie, we were talking about this before the show. And I didn't tell you, this part has jumped into my top 3 game systems.
Thanks, man.
And one, it's its simplicity and speed. Like, it is just the way, and getting to play Sunset Limited with you at TotalCon and getting to see it demonstrated that way and how it just moved right along and the story pushes itself and it's so action based. It's just so cool. And then the fact that it got my 13-year-old daughter to finally say, wow, games are
Awesome.
cool.
Hell yeah.
And like, I already told you, we're working on something that we're going to work on playing over this summer when she comes up to visit. And oh, I can't wait. It's such a fun system. So thank you so much for making it. Like,
Oh, hell yeah, man. Thank you for saying all that nice stuff. Yeah, we had a blast. We had a blast playing at TotalCon. I ran that game at TotalCon, and it was wild. It was just
yeah,
wild.
it was so much fun. And we had such a great cast of characters to play that game. It was, it was so fun. And
Yeah. Yeah, the night before I ran the Devil in New Jersey, and then for you guys I ran Sunrise Limited. We changed the name. So
Sunrise.
I
Sorry. Did I
no,
say,
no,
I
no,
said Sunset
no, no,
Limited, didn't I?
no, you said I think
Ah,
you said Sunrise. Here's the thing. My partner George and I, George's my best friend in the entire world. He is the co-creator of 321 Action. He's really the one that makes the magic happen. Like, we put our heads together, we come up with these ideas, we come up with these stories, but we have a problem, and it's happened to us. This is, going recently become the third time that this has happened to us, where we decide we don't like the name, like midstream during the Kickstarter, and then end up changing it afterwards. We did it first with Point Nemo, became Escape from Point Nemo. Um, the second time was the Sunrise Limited was the Sunset Limited, but we had a thing where we were kind of going back and forth with, is it the Sunrise Limited, is it the Sunset Limited? And on the original doc, um, I think it was always meant to be the Sunrise Limited, but I think there was a miscommunicado between the two of us. And
gotcha.
then we put it up. He goes, no, it actually should be the Sunrise Limited. So I'm like, I had to recommission a little bit of art. It was a whole thing, but like, we don't care. We just want to make sure we put out great product that and great stories that we get to tell. Then, like, Dino Knights became Death by Dino.
Yeah. Um, and folks, grab this rule book if you haven't.
Oh,
You need to have it. Um, so for folks that don't really know you, me being one of them, I mean, we just met at TotalCon and got to talking and we're like, hey, let's do the show. And here we are. So how old were you when you really got into like RPGs?
it's 25.
Nice.
I was 25. You know what? It was one of those things where no one I knew was actually playing it when I was a kid. No one in my area. Now, granted, I grew up in a town called Clifton in New Jersey. Everyone know from New Jersey. Don't hold it against me because we're the greatest state in the entire world. But I grew up in Clifton, and then I went to high school in a town called North Arlington, which is about a town over from where I live now in Kearney. And I didn't know kids were playing, because I mean I'm in high school in like the 90s. I didn't know kids were playing D&D in high school. I was having a hard enough time trying to not get bullied for liking punk rock. So that was just kind of an extra bridge too far for me, as it were. But then how I found out years later that all the football players were playing D&D, because one of their dudes who was also in the musicals. Talk about like a renaissance man, my buddy Jimmy Quigley, who ended up opening a local game shop years later. He's
Oh,
like, yeah, I'm
nice.
gonna play. I play D&D with those dudes all the time. And I was like, why didn't you mention that? You know? But then years later we ended up playing D&D together. But and then it kind of came in and out of my life, the opportunity to play. I didn't finally really sit down and play until I was 25 with George, and I keep pointing up because he lives on the floor above me, and Stu, who I do the Vintage RPG podcast with, who lives a few blocks over that way, and that was it. It was love at first sight, and I never looked back.
Nice. Now, did you start out with D&D or was it with a different system?
3.5 D&D. Yeah,
Nice.
that's what.
I missed 3.5. So, it's a long story that I'll tell another time, but yeah, I missed 3.5 and got out of gaming and came back into it at 4E and was like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I found Pathfinder, which is basically 3.5, and yeah.
It's interesting because she's 25. I'm about to be 45. So that's 20 years ago. So that's what, like 2004, maybe?
Yeah.
Right. The world's, it still felt kind of small back then. Even though the internet was happening and things were happening, and like it's D&D Beyond now, but I think it was called D&D Insider back in the day. It was like the website you can get all like your D&D info from Daddy Hasbro. And my buddy Stu, he would still have to bring get a rolling cart with all the books he'd have to bring because there's no iPads. People are just running it off their phones. And so for me, I didn't get into stuff like Call of Cthulhu until years later. I didn't get into like other RPGs until like years later, because in 2004, like I knew what Blood Bowl was, and I knew like what a few other things were here, and I knew Warhammer was and Magic the Gathering, but like as far as like more of the independent stuff, that was kind of outside of my purview. And like now understanding like how people who have to keep stock in their business run, I can see why a lot of that stuff wasn't on the shelves in the places that I was going, because it was, they needed to make money off of like WotC primarily, because they like, electricity and, not having the red checks bounce. But, things are different now. It's 20 years later,
It's crazy. And you actually kind of touch on it in the forward of the rule book of how, where you said Renaissance, of how the pandemic really ushered in the renaissance of indie game publishers.
It really did. I mean, granted, yes, the pandemic was fucking terrible.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'm not trying to, let's not sugarcoat it. It was not fun.
we were all there. It was not a cool party for anybody. However, it was somewhat of an evening of the playing field for a lot of people who had that dream, whether it was to become a writer, a musician, an artist of any kind, streaming, whatever your medium was. Yeah, exactly. Whatever your medium was going to be, it was like, well, I literally can't leave my house during the early days of it. Like, what am I going to do? It's like, well, I'm going to do the thing I always wanted to do. And that's why, like, oh gosh, I want to say there's like a guitar shortage in like 2021, because everyone's like, it's now's the time, and they like, Fender's like, we don't have any more guitars, like, because people are picking up guitars. Like, the thing I always wanted to do was write, and I always had a reason to not do it. And every time I said I was going to do it, I was going to make a big deal about doing it. I never actually did it. Never followed through. But in the pandemic, like I had the idea for what became Point Nemo. Actually, George's wife, she had a podcast called Notorious Narratives, and they were going to do an episode on Point Nemo, which is an actual place. It's the furthest distance from human life in our world. It's in the middle of the ocean. It's a spaceship graveyard, and it got my wheels turning. And she said the story. I was like, oh man, that'd be a great story. Someone should like write that story someday, make it like a comic book or something. And she looked at me. She's like, Hambone, like, why don't you just do it? And I was like, oh, I can't. I'm not a writer. And then I went downstairs that day and I sat there in front of my computer, and I was like newly sober. I was still in like the very like the baby days of my sobriety. So like I didn't have a way to like find something else to do to take myself out of it. So I said, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. And I just started writing. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody. Like when I finally like posted a picture of it online, when I finally mentioned it, it was already a thing. I said to myself, I had to write the thing, or at least like, get the whole skeleton done. And then, I talked to George, with the idea for the rules. He kind of gave me a better look at it. And then that was it. 3 years later, we got like 13 releases.
That just blows
Well,
my mind
almost 4 years later, yeah.
that I mean, that is a great rate of work for like three,
Yeah.
4 years, and they're all awesome products.
Thank you.
Like,
Thank you very much.
it's like, and I'm not just trying to like toot your horn for you, it's like, I love this. And it's what made you guys decide to go with just a D10?
That's honestly George. It was a thing where, you know, we've worked on stuff together for years. Like we've always had projects we worked on together. And I can be kind of bratty about stuff. You know, I seem like I'm very cool and chill, but I'm kind of a bitch sometimes about things. And it's somewhat of our dynamic. So like I was like, when I first started putting this together, because I was the one who originated this. Um, and I started in July. He came in about October, because that's how long it kind of took me to kind of get it all together. And I was like, it was going to be a D100 system. It was going to be just like Call of Cthulhu. And he's like, well, why don't you just drop the zero? Make it a D10. He's like, everything you're telling me is that you want to make a simple system that's fast and easy to run. And I was like, wow, but people want to roll dice. And he was like, Hambone, but like, he kept like shaping my perspective on it. And everything I could come up with was like, it's I liken him sometimes to like the Jedi who have the fighting style where it's not so bombastic. They're just kind of like waving their lightsaber and like waiting for you to get like tuckered out, womp, womp, womp. And you're like, ah! And he's all like, womp, womp. And he was right. And like I sat there and like I spent a lot of time with my goddaughter. And at the time, she's learning her ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. And I'm like, mostly anyone can count to 10. George is right. Like this is a great way to approach this. And and it seems like a broad generalization, but the fact of the matter is, when you first go to school as a kid, when you watch children's programming, it's ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, right?
Yeah.
And that really is the heart of what I wanted to accomplish with 3, 2, 1 action when I kind of formulated the idea, but like my ego wasn't there yet to be able to like to not see it as kind of binary, as like, well, but this is how it's been done, this is how it is. Like, even though I'd encountered a lot of other independent rule sets, like in my brain, having come to the hobby as late as I did in some ways, and I don't think there's any time where it's too late to join the hobby, but you know having primarily played like Dungeons and Dragons and Call of Cthulhu for as long as I did up until that point, you kind of only see it like two ways. And one thing that's great about George is that he's always found ways to kind of like get me to like see other colors than black and white, and to see like the whole spectrum of like, hey, but what about it? But like, hey, buddy, what about this? And it's cool, man. And that's it. We got a great working relationship. And because of that, we've been able to work out and make these awesome books together, and like come together, like where I open these boxes that I get from Mixum or a printer, like X amount of months later, I was like, hell yeah, brother, did that.
That is going to
So
be the coolest thing, to pop open a box and see your name on the cover.
no, it is. It's odd. It's really cool. Like, and the fact that like with books, they go on shelves, they go on coffee tables, they go in places where like even if you're not going to play them all the time, like you look, you see the spine, you're like, all right, that's cool, I did that, and like you're like, that's cool. And then like to have people reach out and be like, hey, I bought your game from like Noble Knight on a lark, or like I bought your game at like my friendly local game store on a lark because I like the cover. And me and my friends had a great time playing it. I was like, well, tell me more. Tell me what happened. Who did the weird thing? Who ate this thing that they weren't supposed to eat? Like that's, to me, that's like the most rewarding thing, and it in a way it feels weird because I come from music. My background was, I'm an entertainer. I've been a musician my entire life. And like, you know, occasionally, because of products in groups that I've been kind of associated with, you get someone who comes up to you and like tells you how much like the song you wrote 20 something years ago means to them. And that's fucking awesome. And it you never get tired of hearing it. It's humbling and it means a lot. And that said, like it's almost a different experience where when people come up to you and tell you how much they liked your book and how much they enjoyed playing your game, it's a different kind of appreciation because whereas like this person is like this song meant so much to me, it's kind of like in a passive way in their story, like running in the background, kind of as they're going through whatever they're going through.
Right.
Whereas like now with this, they're actively like out there rolling dice, kicking ass, and like now it's instead of just being kind of on in the background of the story, they're active in that story and in that appreciation of the art because, you know, as I think it's the coolest thing in the world to be a fan of whatever you're a fan of. And I think it's even cooler to actually be able to participate in that thing that you are a fan of. And that's what I love about tabletop RPGs and, why I know that like, when I go to somewhere like GaryCon or like any of the other conventions where you see like the creators of the game sitting down with, the people who like are paying to play with them, they're psyched because like, on both sides of it, they're thrilled to be playing with this guy, but this guy is thrilled to be playing with you because he actually gets to see you, be a part of the
Right.
art that he created. So it's very cool, man. It's very cool. That's why like I appreciate that we got to hang out and roll dice together at TotalCon and play Sunrise Limited.
Oh, dude, I had so much fun. Like, and I love like the cinematic storytelling aspect of it,
Thanks.
of how it's like, the imagery that it painted while we were playing it, I could see it almost like as a movie and almost as a comic book at the same time, kind of like jumping around panel to panel as we all went around the table.
And thank you, because that's what we're going for. And it's taken me a while to figure out how to present it to people. Because to be quite honest, dear viewer, I am shit at marketing. I'm not. It's not my strong point. Um, but like what George and I do is we essentially approach this kind of like a playable novella, right? Where each book or zine, you get a whole world in this book or zine where like you have pre-generated characters, you have maps, art, charts, weapons, and an entire story from A to B. Where if you want to open this up and run it as is A to B, you can absolutely do that, and everyone's going to go home happy because everyone's going to get to have their hero moment, which is essentially like what we wanted to do is give everyone an opportunity to be a hero. However, the other side of it is the books are loaded with lore as well, caked into everything, including like the weapons, the characters' backstories, everything. Where if you're like, yeah, I want to take it in my own direction, there's enough narrative threads and everything that you need to just put it in front of your players and then let everyone run wild with it. It's not meant for campaign play. Every book that we write is you're looking at like 1 to 3 sessions, maybe 5 for Children of Uma, for like 4 to 6 players, up to 8 if you're feeling crazy. But it's not meant for a long time, but it's meant for a good time.
Yeah, dude, I mean, you nailed it. Like, it's so much fun. Um, and yeah, like, I can't wait for my daughter to come up this summer because we've already got like a rough outline of what we want to do,
Yeah.
which I was talking to you about before the show and stuff. And yeah, it's going to be so much fun. So we'll have to test it with you and see how it goes.
Yeah. And honestly, man, you're my bud. So if you want me to stat up a monster for you, if you have like a question about how to stat up the creature you're talking about, dude, just hit me up, man. I love this shit.
Heck yeah. Oh, dude, it's like I love it. Like I could sit and talk mechanics and all that
Yeah.
stuff all day for hours. So you actually just brought up, well, when we were talking about like the session play and whatnot, and you said it wasn't meant for a campaign. Um, Children of Uma.
Yeah.
That is the next one I'm getting ready to crack open. The folks I work with actually want me to run a game for them, and
Awesome.
I don't think it's going to end up being like, you know, a campaign by any means. But I was actually thinking maybe Sunrise Limited or Children of Uma. I don't know if they'd all be into the horror bit with The Devil in New Jersey, but
That's also R-rated. Like, one thing across the board that we don't put in any of our books, any kind of like sex, sexual business, or like sexual encounters. It's because it's first off, the love story ruins every movie. When you're
yeah,
trying to
it
like
does.
gonna ram that love story and it ruins every movie. But like, there are love stories in these books. There are, but it's not as overt where it's gonna take away from the entire overall experience of it. But like most of our adventures are PG-13 for like violence, some light cussing. But The Devil in New Jersey it's definitely hard R. There's a lot of gore, a lot of guts, a lot more cussing in there. Um, I use the F word a lot because it's about New
Oh, yeah.
Jersey. I mean,
I'm from Maine and I still use it a lot. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's more the salt than the pepper at our tables in New Jersey, if you know what I mean.
uh, so with those not familiar with Children of Uma, where you just had Death by Dino, which is a continuation of Children of Uma, could you kind of give folks a
Yeah,
summary of what Children of Uma is?
sure. So Children of Room is a vehicle battle RPG. We grew up loving movies like Mad Max, and wanted to create a well actually this one honestly started with George. This was George's baby. um we had done Rocket to Russia, we had done Escape from Point Nemo. The third book was supposed to be a horror book. He had this idea for this horror, and he woke up one day and he's like, yeah, he just wasn't feeling it, but he had this idea for Children of Uma. um Children of Uma is very much like, the Grapes of Wrath meets the Outsiders, um, meets the Warriors, meets Mad Max, and they all seem like a lot of very like contrasting ideas, but we managed to pull it off. We managed to pull it together. But you play a teenage band called the Helsings. Now we didn't want to, we don't like the word gangs. Gangs is very negative in connotation, um, because you fight against a lot of other bands in the wasteland. It's 2060 Kansas. It's post-apocalyptic. However, it's the United States, so there's like electric cars, carbon vehicles, no shortage of ammo. Because let's face it, this is America. We're never going to run out of bullets. And the story really is about you trying to carve out a little piece of home for you and the rest of the orphans. But like all these bands are just fighting all the time, and it's about finding a way to unite all the bands in the wasteland, and in a lot of ways, it parallels the Wizard of Oz. And it was one of those things that like George was like walking me through it like step by step, and I was like, "Holy shit, it's Wizard of Oz!" And he was like, "Yeah, yeah." If you get to the end of this journey and then you look back at it through the lens of the Wizard of Oz, you're like, "Oh shit." It really is, but it was also like a way for us to really kind of stretch our legs with the rules. So, our system, for those who may not be familiar, you roll a single d10 at or below your stat. Any kind of penalty or bonus is 1, 2, or 3 in either direction, plus or minus. All attacks automatically hit, you just roll damage. You have luck points instead of hit points, and you can spend, even if you're going to have a moment where you're like, I've only got like 5 luck points left, and there's an army of guys coming at us and I have a grenade. You can make a heroic sacrifice because you can spend your luck to adjust your rolls if you say below your action check or your brawn check. And we make it really easy and streamlined so you can have a vehicle battle RPG. You're moving at like top speed unless you decide that you're not moving, and you're just kind of cinematically talking about what the car is doing, and then you're essentially trying to steal other vehicles. So you start out with things like motorcycles, but you end up in monster trucks and so much more. Because one thing that we are terrible at 3-2 in action is brevity. So this book, we're like, oh, it's going to be like a zine, but it'll be a thick zine, and then now it's a 144-page book with 36 playable vehicles. There are 7 or 8 different bands that you are fighting against. There are 7 or 8 playable characters. There's a bunch of weapons in there. It's insane. It turned out to be this massive tome, but like an A5 size tome, and it's cool. Like I still look back at it and kind of marvel that like we just couldn't stop making more vehicles.
You got to love it when that happens, though, that you just get in that rhythm until, as long as you can stop, I suppose.
Well, it's funny because there's that old saying, you gotta like kill your darlings or whatever it is, and I and
Oh, what is?
we do that sometimes, like but we didn't do it with Children of Uma because it hit a point where we were like the story felt so good, and we were like, well, we don't want to cut anything out, like, and we've already crossed the page count, which puts us into like the territory where we have to make like a perfect bound or a hardcover. So fuck it, we're in for a penny, we're in for a pound of
Right.
paper, so let's do it. And so we built that out, and then we built out a secondary zine for Children of Uma, which, again, going back to the part where I said I was shit at marketing, it doesn't say Children of Uma on it, but it's Children of Uma Mini Submania, which is a sister zine to Children of Uma, which we wanted to give you more different kind of rules. So we came up with stealth rules. So Mini Submania is like, if you like Metal Gear Solid and you like Batman Arkham Asylum, where it's very stealth oriented.
Hide in the cardboard box and creep around.
Yeah, exactly. Climb in the vents. We have a whole thing about climbing in the vents, like the map. Like you have the map that is on the ground, the map that's in the vents, and then you escape in sweet ass mini subs. So I want to say, all said and done, 36/8 is what, 44.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think I think between the two zines, there's 44 playable vehicles, and we still have one that made the cutting room floor. So, um,
Wow.
we were busy.
We have Direct Sun in the chat. They said, John, thanks for the Vintage RPG podcast. Puts a smile
Oh,
on my face every time I listen.
thank you very much for saying that. Yeah, we're going on 7 years with that. It's gonna be 7 years, July 7th.
Wow. Congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, but like remember, like for the a bunch of those years was pandemic, so it's just kind of like one long year. But yeah,
Right.
thank you very much. Thank you for listening. We really do. It means a lot to us. Thank you.
Yeah. I can't wait to dig into Children of Uma. I came home from Total Con and I put everything on a shelf, and then over the last week, like I told you, I hadn't been feeling well this week,
Yeah.
and I started reading all the books, and I'm just like, oh man, I gotta play this. So
We went deep. We went deep in those books, man. A lot of in jokes, like a lot of references to New Jersey, the Misfits, old spy movies.
nice. That's awesome. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with the way I've got my lighting reading here. One thing we kind of touched on that I put in the post and stuff about everything today was the top 5.
Yeah.
I don't want to dig into our top 5s yet,
Cool.
but you said that each one of the books had their own top 5.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool. So for Sunrise Limited, what was the biggest inspiration for that?
Vampire Hunter D,
Nice.
Castlevania. For me, it all comes back to Tombstone,
Yeah.
with yeah. And I forget what else George said today about it, but like, it's one long boss fight. It really is. It's like a side scrolling this is the one thing, like, one of the things about our books is because we consider them to be like kind of playable novellas where you could run it our way, you could run it your way. The Sunrise Limited is literally on rails because it's a train, and you start at the head, you go to the tail. Um, but yeah, definitely Vampire Hunter D, I think, was a big influence on that. My wife is somewhere around here. I'll ask her. I'm gonna shoot her a real quick text and ask her about that real quick. Um, but for me, it was like Castlevania. For me, like, I always think about Tombstone. I grew up watching those westerns where, like, there was the good guy, but the good guys were never really good. You
Yeah,
know,
well, yeah. Well,
so
it's like, look at like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
yeah,
It's the perfect example of the good guy not really being that good.
exactly. And Sunrise is interesting too because Sally, my wife, and Geo came up with the idea together. So Sally, Geo, and I, we all wrote it together. And then Sally did the cover. She did all the character design. She did all the creature design. She did like a lot of art in there as well. So it's got Sally all over it. But she says for Sally, like The Quick and the Dead, Deadwood, the TV show Warrior, which is
I haven't
on.
seen that one. I'm gonna write
I
that
want to. I
down.
want to say it's on Netflix now. It was on. It was on Stars, then it was on Max, now it's on Netflix. But yeah, the Quick and the Dead, man, Sam Raimi. For me, like a lot of stuff always comes back to like Sam Raimi and John Carpenter. But yeah, Quick and the Dead.
Yeah,
But yeah,
boy, we are
that's what Sunrise Limited would be.
two peas in a pod when it comes to our director choices, I'll tell you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
um Speaking of Raimi, have you I have purchased it but not watched Evil Dead Rise yet.
I really enjoyed it.
I've yet to watch it, so it's like it's on my list, but my fiance is not a big horror person.
mm,
So it's when it's late at night and she's like, "What do you feel like watching?" Evil Dead Rise isn't the one that I'm going to stop on.
yeah. I think the important way to look at it, and this is all I'm going to say about it, is that it's the smartest thing they could have done to continue the franchise by acknowledging that the evil just exists and that it doesn't have to be at a cabin in the woods.
Right.
You know, um, that's it. And then you just watch it, and like they make enough nods to the original without becoming overbearing. And yeah, I think you're gonna like it.
Yeah, I've got to watch it, and I'm trying to think. My son gets out of work at like 10:30 or something like that, and if my fiance goes to bed, he and I might have to watch it tonight. So.
Right on, man. And yeah, message me, let me know what you think.
Yeah. um, I want to kind of go back a little bit. One thing that
Yeah,
you had said was how George constantly gets you to look at things in a different way.
yeah.
And for me, the person that I've got to give a shout out to that is like that with me is Brian Shutter.
Brian's the friggin' best, man. We became fast
God,
friends.
he is so awesome.
Yeah,
And I have a game that I told him about that I was working on. And when you were talking about how you came up with the original 3-2-1 rules being kind of based off of Cthulhu, I had this overly complex way that I wanted to do things with this game. And Brian's like, dude, what are you thinking?
yeah,
Do this. Came up with this whole dice system for me and was like, do this, and do this. And I was like, how did I not see that? Wow.
yeah.
And yeah, it's so cool. Like having someone like that.
It's good. It's good also to have a pal who will shoot you straight.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like, people are more comfortable kissing your ass than telling you the truth. And that sucks. Because as much as I want to hear I have a good idea, I'd rather hear how I can make my good idea better and actually like successful.
Yeah.
And that comes through honest critique and feedback. Like I said, like I said a little earlier, like I'm kind of bitchy. I am kind of bitchy. I get a little grumpy. Like I'm like wild like a squirrel. But like, you know, I'm like the poster child for have a Snickers sometimes. And but like George is for me, he is far and away like my best friend in the world. He is so creative, he's so smart, he's so clever, and he just sits there and like where I'm like fast, 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 he slows down and he's like, and he sees the matrix and he's like, well, what about this? And then like, the next thing you know, we're on a different tangent and he's got me like figuring out how to make mini golf rules and like, but that's you need someone like that in your life who will actually tell you the truth and shoot you straight. And I think people like that are rare. And the
Yep.
people who who you have in your life like that should be cherished because uh that's rarefied air, my friend. And it's not an easy stratosphere to attain, as it were. But yeah, Brian's great. And like in
He
the end of the
is.
day,
It's like,
a game that's hard to play is not one that many people will play.
yeah. Yep. And that's the direction I was headed in. And it was like, you roll this way and do this, and then this will happen. And he's like, dude, no, you're making it way too hard.
The thing is, and I think this is always important to say out loud. There's no wrong way to play a game. There's no like, oh, that rule set is it sucks, or that rule set is whatever. That rule set just might not be for you. And like I think that there are people out there who like love, crunchy games like, that kind of cereal that's gonna tear up the roof of your mouth, kind of crunchy. And then
Yeah.
there's some people who like, I want something fast, easy, where we could actually play a game through the course of a night. Like I can get anyone to come to the table, pretty much almost any age, as long as they have the attention span for it and they could rock and roll. But I think there's space at the table for everybody and for every play style. Um, my thing is I like my goal is to get you to buy my game, obviously, because we are a for-profit organization, and if we don't make any money, we can't make more games. But my secondary goal is that when you spend your hard-earned money on one of our games, you at least read the book. And my third goal is that you play it at least once, uh, so you really get the true enjoyment out of it, which is in the playing. So when it goes on that shelf and it looks cool, um, you know that like you've got a fond memory attached to that book, and that's fucking A, man.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And like, I have that with Sunrise Limited now. It's like,
Oh,
I'll forever see all the guys I was staying
oh,
with, Joey and Elvis being at the table,
oh,
you, Sally. And
yeah,
speaking of Sally, you've brought her up a couple times in her art. Her art is so unreal. Like,
yeah,
I wish
man.
I had brought a few extra $100 with me to just buy that binder of art up.
Yeah, yeah. No, she's something special, man. She's a very, um, I mean, I don't know how long you want me to go on and on about my wife, but she's amazing. She's very much her own, like a great independent creator. She is got a crazy mind for design and for art and for like ideas like this thing. Like I literally in the forward it talks about how I was inside working because I work from home and they're outside because I happen to be working on Saturday. Come out, they're like, oh, we have an idea. And then it was the Sunrise Limited. But like uh yeah, like I couldn't ask for a better partner as for someone to walk through life with, but I couldn't ask for an even better creative partner than like I'll come and I'll look at her and I'll be like, how about this? And she'd be like, no. And I'd be like, how about this? She'd be like, oh yeah. And I'm like, it's cool, man. But like, watching her, I have the benefit of like kind of looking. There's her. You see over my shoulder, you can see her
Yep.
her crafting table. So like, we both work from home. So like, I get the pleasure of like seeing like how the sausage gets made, as it were, when it comes to like the comics that she's making and like whatever. So that's pretty cool.
That is cool, and we're both lucky in that fact. Because my fiance is the same way. Like I was telling you before, I'm working on setting up the online store,
Yeah,
but she has been all about it, and it's a lot the same way. I'll be like, well, what if I did this? And she's like, no, I don't think
yeah,
so. And then I'll be like, what about this? And she'll be like, yep, go for it. And
yeah. It's
to,
wonderful to have people who support you.
Yeah, it is. And especially when they share the same vision, it's
Yeah,
like
but
that's just great,
yeah, it's
and
pretty cool. Yeah, and on top of that, like she's like the sickest artist, like just unreal. Like I look over my shoulder sometimes, I'm like, damn, that's a cool monster.
nice.
You know?
Yeah. I'm
So,
drawing like stick figures and sausage people. Meanwhile, I cannot draw. I don't know about you. So
so I can draw um Opus from Bloom County. Uh but in a way it's kind of like not awesome because ultimately like most of his face is shaped like a dick. Um I, I used to growing up in Clifton, there was the Allwood Public Library, which is near to where I live, and I would go and I would take out the books like how to draw, and they had the Hanna Barbera how to draw books. Like I think if you put a gun to my head, I could probably draw a Yogi Bear or at least the head of Scooby Doo, which is not shaped like a dick. But yeah, my artistic talent is not the best. You know,
no,
yeah.
no. Um, so I'm all over the place, so you'll have to
Yeah, it's all good.
forgive me.
No,
Um,
I'm having a blast, man. This is a great conversation.
Another project that you've got that I had backed that I'm super excited about that is uh from 321 Horror is Hotel Exorcist.
Yeah.
Now that's solo play, right?
No, that's a
No.
full-fledged adventure. There is a
Oh, I
solo
thought
play. That pamphlet was to promote the Devil in New Jersey, which I didn't have anything really to promote. Like I needed something to promote horror. Um, I, I created the character Jake Griffin, and like I wanted to like have something to do with him. Um, and we're all over the place as far as production schedule wise goes. Like we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We pivot all the time, but I brought it over to George. Like, what do you think? And like we crafted this thing together, and we put that out just to have out, and also to be able to like have something else to sell when I did shows and to give to people because we didn't have like a lot of pamphlet adventures, which when you really think about how much it costs to make a pamphlet adventure versus like an actual zine, yeah, the pamphlet adventures are just a ridiculous amount of money comparative to what an actual zine costs. But that was the solo adventure to get people kind of like with the idea of we can write horror. So it,
gotcha.
but when we actually made the Hotel Exorcist, we changed the name to the Hotel Exorcist Only the Lonely, um, because it would be very confusing otherwise. But yeah, no,
Gotcha.
the Hotel Exorcist is George is on his pass of it right now. And how we work, it's kind of cool. Like he'll start writing and then I'll follow him, or I'll start writing, then he'll follow me. And so uh the hotel got bigger um than initially on the first pass, which is, again, terrible at brevity. But it's shaping up into something really, really, really cool with like a big finish. Like um I love movies and I love comics and I love stories. And as much as some people will say, like, it's about the journey, and then the boss fight doesn't exactly matter. No, the boss fight absolutely matters. Like, if you're gonna build up to fighting this guy, like they're not supposed to do the job. You're supposed to. I mean, granted, maybe it doesn't go as long as like Piper and David and They Live, because that did go on maybe a little too far, a little long, but I would never turn it off. But like it's the boss fight. It needs to be kind of epic. Like this is what you built yourself up for. Like this is why you work to a point to get here. But so
Right.
we always try to write like a big finish. And I think the big finish for the Hotel Exorcist is going to be pretty cool.
Nice. I can't wait. Um, that was one I think that came out. Was that last year? That
We
was
kickstarted in October.
October, that's right.
Yep.
And I think that was right about the time that Levi had been like, "You gotta get John on the show. You gotta get John on the show. You
Oh
2
yeah.
had hit it off so well." He's like, "Get John on the show." And then we met at Total Con, and I'm just like, "Yep, let's get on the show."
Yeah.
So,
Shout out to Levi Combs, man. That dude is
yeah.
a real one. He is
Yep.
such a great dude. He's a true friend to me. I love the guy to death. And like, talk about a brain for the hobby and a brain for like all the cool stuff that like we like. Like
Yeah.
if the hobby went away tomorrow and we didn't have RPGs to talk about anymore. Like I know I'd call him every day and be like, "Did you see this? What about this? Oh man, I saw this magazine. It was a throwback." Like because like you know you know swinging back to like me coming up in music, there was always that thing where like all you end up doing is kind of like talking shop. Like when I was younger, like the music scene was cutthroat. As much as it's like we're brotherhood, we're community. Everyone was trying to cut the legs out of each other. Everyone's fighting for that little piece, small piece of turf. And the RPG scene is not like that, man. It's very like much all boats rise. It's very much everyone is like supportive. Granted, they're dicks. There are lots of dicks out there. There's dicks everywhere. But like, uh, it's been my experience in this business that like if you stay in your lane and you align yourself with cool people who are like, and when I say cool, meaning like they're not looking for drama. They want to have a good time and like, eat some pizza, sling some dice. Like you're gonna have a much, much more enjoyable experience in the hobby. And like Levi was from day one. I know him because he came on the vintage RPG when we were, early on to promote whatever, because he's one of the most prolific dudes you'll ever meet. And
Yeah.
we've been buddies ever since, So he's the best.
He really is. And that's how he and I met, was me having him on. It was back when
Awesome.
Dungeon Malarkey came out, that he was when he was kickstarting that, and I had him on.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, that looks like that book I had when I was in high school. And I'm like, I got to get this guy on.
Yeah.
And, and we just clicked right off. And yeah, yep, he's awesome.
Yeah, he
And,
rules, man.
and yeah, the volume of work that he puts out with
Just
Planet
laps
X is
everybody,
just,
you know?
yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know if you're a big Marvel movie guy or not, but,
I am.
I know a lot of the comic book people I know, some of them are like, yeah, I'm not really a big fan of the movies, but I love them. And especially when Steve is lapping Falcon, he's like, on your left. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I feel Levi is with everybody, on your left.
But here's the one difference that sets Levi apart from all those Marvel movies. Levi's all killer, no filler, man. Like Levi has yet to phone one in. And I'll say this uh because I would say this to his face. I would say this even though he might be watching right now. Um the dude just gets better book over book. And then like we'll take something like Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride, which was friggin' awesome. And how many ever years later, he finds a way to kind of improve upon it by expanding it, make it for just, but still like in a way that isn't so much like And I'm going to say something controversial here, but I don't care. Like Lucas going back and being like Han didn't shoot first, and kind of reinventing it. Like Levi is very has a lot of reverence for his original source material. So like when he goes and he updates something, it's made from a place where like, okay, I could actually make this cooler, but still keep it real.
Right.
And I admire that. I do admire that about him. And like, no zine that he has put out to date has disappointed. And I say it whenever we talk about it on Vintage RPG, or I'll say it to anyone who listens, like uh, anything you buy from Planet X, be it a actual adventure or be it like a dungeon malarkey or big chungus or whatever, uh, it's gonna give you something cool to put into your RPG. And at the very least, it's gonna make you pop and remember why you love tabletop RPGs and comic books and fucking weird movies. So,
Yeah.
he's the
And
dude.
um, because I always screw up titles, and I know I'm going to screw it up with this. Vorpal Codex.
Vorpal Almanac. Yeah.
Vorpal. See, I told you I screwed the title up. Vorpal Almanac. I've got it over
Yeah.
around the corner here, and I almost grabbed it. But that book, oh my God,
Yeah.
I can't remember the artist's name that he worked with, but she killed it on all the art in that, and then his
You mean
stuff.
my lovely wife,
Oh, it
Sally
was that was
Canfield?
Sally. Oh my God.
Yeah, Sally.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So that's even better because the art and his writing in that book, I'm just like, wow, it was, you talked about the salt and pepper. That was like the perfect combo of salt and
Yeah.
pepper in that book.
Yeah.
And
He hit her up about that. He was like, "Hey, you drew all these swords. Let's do something." And then the Exalted Funeral was gracious enough to put it out. Levi did all the work. She did all the swords, and yeah, I think we sold out of the ones that we were selling at cons because people were like, "I like swords," like it's like
yeah,
the perfect game supplement because whether you're playing OSC, whether you're playing D&D, Pathfinder, um, some other game that has swords in it, it's got swords in it. So whether, you just slide the stat over and it's a badass sword,
yeah,
that,
yep,
your friends who've already read like the Dungeon Master's Guide several times won't see coming, you know?
yeah, yep. The
So,
the the folks that swear they don't meta game that will be like, that when you bring out the beholder and you describe it perfectly, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds like a beholder," and it's like, "Oh,
I'm shaking my magic 8 ball. All signs point to you read the book.
yeah, yeah,
I will say though, if you're gonna do it, you got to lean all the way in. Like, I had a friend named Sean. I called the Living Monster Manual, and it was genuinely it's something that I've only thought about recently because I don't know if you've read or anyone watching at home has read the Goodman Games How to Write Adventures That Don't Suck. Um, Joe Goodman has this like great part there in the middle somewhere where he's like talking about you know you got to keep your players on your toes. So like if they're gonna, and I'm paraphrasing here wildly, but it's like if the troll's going to make it purple, like describe it like differently than like they may be used to kind of like take away their assumptions or whatever. And it's like one of those things that like after playing D&D for like 20 years, I'm like, it's actually a really good idea because
yeah."
my buddy, it was almost like kind of a challenge to me as a dungeon master. Like, can I stump him today? Is today the day? And I've never been able to do it.
It's funny that you say that because I have a friend, Eben, that is exactly the same way, and it was always the same thing. Can I describe it so that he won't guess what it is?
Yeah.
And it was just like he'd be sitting at the other end of the table, like, "Please try again." It's the it's the oh geez, just completely lost the name. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it was just like, oh my God, I can never get one by this guy. And then I saw something similar. It wasn't necessarily that. It's like, yeah, you got to change it up. And now I haven't GM'd a game for him in a couple of years. So it'll be interesting when I finally do to see if I can stump him and be
That's actually
uh,
a great idea for a con game. Um, Guess that monster.
yeah. Get your Vanna White or someone off to the side, and then you just pull the cover off, and it's like a standee of the monster there or something. So should we hit our top fives? What did we
Yeah.
just we said we were going to go the top 5 movies that have influenced how we create and what we make.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I will let you start with your number 5.
Goonies.
Ooh,
Honestly, you could take Goonies, Monster Squad, like at any given point, and just kind of swap them in and out. But like to me, at the core of everything I write and the things that I want to accomplish is that like the most powerful thing in the world is friendship, and like being there for your buddies and going on these adventures together, and like the power of doing it together. And that's why like if you go through any action adventure really at its core, like the core tenet is love and friendship and like you know coming together to fight something that's greater than we are alone, but together we might be able to do it and get through it. So, yeah, man, the Goonies, Monster Squad, two sides of the same coin.
Wolfman's got nards.
Goddamn greatest line in cinematic history.
It sure is. Well,
It's like
my number,
Rosebud.
yeah,
Wolfman's got nards. Same.
I love it. My number 5, I actually went in a roundabout way of getting somewhere. You mentioned it, and maybe we can go back to it later. But was the Iron Man series is my number 5
Oh,
because I had ambitions of getting into gaming
right.
and writing and all that back in the early 2000s with my brother, who unfortunately passed away.
Sorry to hear that, man.
And I went down a thank you, and I went down a very dark path for many years, um, and almost didn't make it out until I got back into gaming. And that was basically my salvation that pulled me out of that darkness of addiction. And the Iron Man movies to me showed that you can change and become something better.
Hell yeah, brother.
And that's what I've tried to do over the last like 14, 15 years since
Yeah,
sobering up and having my youngest daughter born is be that better man. So that was my number 5.
dude, good for you, man. I'm about to hit 5 years myself in June, so
Nice. Awesome. Congrats.
congrats to you too, man. It's a long road, but it's not as lonely when you got friends.
It isn't.
So good on you.
And so number 4 for you.
So for me, I love horror. It's something that I definitely like. I did not like as a kid. I was definitely scared shitless as a child, but now like as I'm older, like I'm a voracious horror fan. Um, I would say The Exorcist is to me the high watermark of like what good horror could be. Um,
Ooh.
and really like, and granted, it's a very specific kind of horror, but like it's the idea that it's more than just something you could punch. Um, that it's that horror is just so much bigger than just the individual and like the scenario in that moment. Um, that to me is like the real scary part of it. It's it's the being overtaken by something, the forcefulness of it, the visceralness of it. Like I definitely try to put a lot of that in. Like when I'm exploring anything that's horrific, I think like is it gross? Does it look like it hurts? Uh, does it make you feel scared and powerless? And I think that like Stu Horvath and RPG Podcast had a great quote many years ago. I don't even think he even remembers saying it, but I remember it, and I tell people all the time that he did. But horror is helplessness, and that's what true horror is. It's helplessness. So, The Exorcist, number 4 for me.
Nice. That is a fantastic choice. And I would have to agree because the most horrified feeling I've ever had was as a kid was being chased. And I
Yeah,
felt completely helpless being chased that day. And it was the
yeah,
most horrified I had ever been. And like ever since then, it's weird. Horror movies affected me differently. I think this is Brian chiming in the chat. I could be wrong, but he said number 5, Lost Boys, number
yeah.
4, Event Horizon, number
Oh
3,
yeah,
number 3, Exorcist 3. Which, damn, that scene when they're in the hospital and that sheet and the sheet just comes following him, or the demon, I guess, in the sheet comes following him out the
yeah,
door. I'm just
yeah.
like, ugh.
Change my bedpan.
Yeah. So my number 4, due to a adventure I started work. He says no, it's Jim. Okay, that makes sense. All right. My number 4 is due to a adventure I started working on for the Miskatonic repository, but
Oh,
sidebarred.
cool,
But
cool.
it's the Howling.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
when you
baby.
when you said you didn't like horror movies as a kid, the first
Yeah,
time I saw The Howling, I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. My dad let me watch it thinking it was a brilliant idea. And it was on ABC in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday with like the swear words and the boobs blurred out, and that was about it.
yeah,
But I didn't sleep for about a month after I
yeah.
watched that movie. And what I want to, oh, American Werewolf in London for number 2 for Jim.
That's good.
Um, but I did not sleep for about a month after seeing The Howling. And where Jim said American Werewolf in London is number 2, and I've got The Howling at 4. Interesting fact. And I just lost the visual effects guy from American Werewolf in London. I just lost his name.
Oh,
Um,
Baker.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, but initially he was on The Howling, and that transformation in the doctor's office in The Howling was originally started by him, and then he got the big fat paycheck offer from American Werewolf in London. Was like, peace out. And whomever took over The Howling's visual effects had to finish that scene. And then he went on to film the transformation in American Werewolf in London, which is the greatest werewolf transformation of all time.
All time,
All time.
ever,
Yeah.
ever.
Ever has been and ever will be.
Well, sidebar. I think there's really only like five really good werewolf movies: The Howling, American Werewolf in London, Silver Bullet,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
the original The Wolf Man,
Yep.
um, Dog Soldiers.
Dog Soldiers is crazy.
Right?
And
Dog
that's
Soldiers.
one that I actually forget about until somebody brings it up, and then I've got to go watch it.
Someone brought it up to me like a week or two ago, and I was like, yes. But yeah, because there's so many like great vampire flicks, but werewolves always kind of get the shaft. I mean, yes, honorable mention Wolf Cop. Wolf Cop was awesome in its own weird way, but like as far as like legit werewolf movie goes, I think there's only the five. But I digress.
I can't argue that fact with you at all. So you're number 3.
Number three. So I kind of go back and forth on this. Because like I love mysteries. I love mysteries, and I think that there's like I've to pat myself on the back a little bit. I've gotten a little bit better at, um, and I'm actually pretty decent at like solving TV mysteries.
Hmm.
It's very rare in the last like 5 years anyone's gotten over on me on like who the killer is or like what's happening here. And it does happen, but it's hard. You don't ever want to play Clue with me. I'm 2-part mini golf, and I will smoke anybody at Clue. But Clue, the actual movie Clue, was a big influence on me, because I think there's a certain, yes, it is a mystery, and yes, you kind of get to see it unfold, and it's non-traditional in so many ways, but like the movie Clue was a massive influence on me, still to this day. Um, but also like I love mystery TV shows like Murder She Wrote. I enjoyed the recent Nancy Drew thing. I thought that was pretty decent. I just love mystery stuff. So for me, like a good mystery is hard to kind of pass up.
Interesting. I would not have pegged you for a Clue guy.
Oh, I love Clue.
I'm trying to think. That's Tim Curry's in that, right?
Yeah, he is.
It's the
I mean,
butler.
like Tim Curry's in it, leaving from the band Fear. Leslie Ann Warren, Colleen Camp as a vet. Michael McKean, freaking Christopher Lloyd. Uh, oh, just
That's right. Christopher Lloyd's in that too.
Christopher Lloyd, Madeline Kahn, like just Eileen Brennan, like and it's insane. It's got like 4 endings, and it's like Howard Hessman's in it. Like you just, it's such a great, it's a classic. I hope they never remake it. May they never remake Clue.
There's a lot of movies that they should never have remade that
Yeah,
they have that, and there's many more that I hope they never do.
yeah.
So for me at number 3, I have a movie we actually talked about at TotalCon, The Warriors.
Ooh, I know. Oh,
I the love I have for that movie, and I can't even put it into words. Unfortunately, when I get it on Vudu or Fandango, whatever it's called now, they only had the comic book version. And
unforgivable.
I couldn't agree more. It is like I'm sitting here watching. I didn't catch that was what this movie was going to do. And the first time it flipped through a comic book page, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
And I was like, what is that shit? And I'm like, I paused the movie, hit the back button, and I'm like, is this a movie or a documentary? And I went, it was the movie, and then it's like a special director's cut. And I was like, holy cow, okay. And I finished watching it, and like, I was just like, ugh. But, you
oh,
know, yeah,
ah,
that, yeah, I love that movie.
so good,
And
so good.
we'll have to talk after, but I've got something that I'm working on that has hugely influenced by that. So that I would love
Oh
your
yeah,
input on. So,
yeah, of course.
all right. So number 2, my friend.
Big Trouble in Little China.
Whew, great
I
pick.
know. Ah, yeah. Like for me, I think Jack Burton is like the perfect anti-hero. You know,
Yep.
too dumb for his own good. You know, wants to make a big stink about how he doesn't want to do the right thing, but he's always going to do the right thing. Uh, Great one-liners, great action. Uh, you know, just and John Carpenter. Like I love John Carpenter. Um, I tend to say he's my favorite director simply because he's made the most movies that I love, and that I watch again and again and again. Like, on this list, it's hard not to be like The Thing, Escape from New York. Like
Yeah.
it's just, there's so many movies that I think that like even outside of like 3, 2, 1 action, like that were just so formative for me. But yeah, Big Trouble in Little China, man. That's it. That's number 2.
Gracie, don't you want to kiss me? Jack? Nope. That's from
Nope.
Jim in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So
So
good.
my number 2, I didn't have to dig too far, but it was hard to pick between the first and second movie, but and meaning theatrically released first and second movie
Yeah.
was Star Wars, because
Yeah.
the very first Star Wars movie, the first time I ever saw it, my brother was 11 years older than me, and he went into the Marines. And his first trip home, he had a package mailed ahead of him that he said we couldn't open until Christmas. And when we got it, he had bought a Laserdisc player for us and a few movies.
Yeah, buddy.
And it was the Star Wars. Well, it wasn't the first time I had seen it. I should say the first time I had seen it at home. He
Yeah.
had gotten us the Laserdisc copy of each of the original trilogy. And oh my God, it's like sitting at home and watching those movies. But that is one of my fondest memories of my brother, is getting those original releases of Star Wars from him.
Yeah.
And just after he would leave to go back into the Corps, I would just sit there, how those movies made it through the decades without getting scratched to bits from me watching them over and over and over is beyond me. But yeah, I mean, the hero's journey, the it's everything about it, like the Force and all of that with Star Wars is just, yeah. I mean, you can tell looking behind me here,
Yeah, see
Tatooine,
Hoth.
Hoth, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then over on this wall, you can't see it. I've got this big Rogue One poster because I think that's the best movie they've made of like sense. All right, so now that we're going to divert a little bit from the list, what do you think of Solo?
I really enjoyed it. I
I
enjoyed
loved
it,
it.
and I was like, all right. Like the first one's like they did what they had to do, right? And I think that like we're gonna go deep in this. All right, so I think Rogue One was the best thing that they've done to date because it was like none of the Skywalkers showed up until the very last like frame because
Right.
they had to like tack something on there. But like it showed you like really what the commitment was to the rebellion for people who weren't superpowered, for people who like didn't really wake up in the morning and intend to do the right thing. Um, and how it all became possible was this crazy suicide mission that they went on. And I think that really for me, what that gave me was like hope that like, okay, now for more Star Wars, we could finally get away from the Skywalker saga. Um,
Yeah.
and you know, for better or worse. Solo, I was like, okay, so if you're gonna go back to the well with Han Solo, you got to put it over the plate. You got to do what you did here. We have to see the Kessel Run, the whole thing. But I was like, okay, if they did another one, that's where things I think would start getting good because for whatever reason they had to reintroduce the world to a character that's beloved for like almost half a century at this point. But okay, sure. But yeah, the next one would have been I think even better. But they're never going to make another Solo movie.
No, because it just got panned so hard, and it's
It's
unrightfully so.
it's hard because Star Wars is still generationally a very specific thing, and I think that it's become a thing that Disney, Lucasfilm, or whatever is kind of still not fully ready to let go of because they have to keep like shoving the Skywalkers down our throats because like Star
Yeah.
Wars, like to me, like at its best is is expanding the universe because there's so much more than like having to base it on like three characters, and then like trying to introduce new characters but still having the oldies there and not really giving them the chance to shine because like we're too busy. We, as in the cosmic sense, the world is too busy being angry about what's happening with these three characters and not really giving the other three the rub, that they
Right.
rightfully deserve because like they're the ones who need to carry the story forward. Um, and I think that by and large, what we've seen over the last like 10 years is like on TV and in the cartoons, they're really building this fantastic world out. In fact, like my buddy GLK was talking to me the other day about it. He was asking me about the Bad Batch, which if you haven't watched the Bad Batch yet, you love Star Wars. The Bad Batch is where it's at. Um, but he was like, but this doesn't make sense. Something that happened, because he's like, I just watched this, and now this is here, like but there's something that's not connecting. I go, but they'll get there, and that's really what Star Wars has been since the prequels, right? They've been playing 26 years of filling the plot holes and
Yeah.
playing catch up and like, well, don't worry about how we got here with this. Like 4 years from now, there's going to be a series that kind of bridges that gap. So I think we're about like 5 to 10 years away from everything making sense. But they're not quite there yet.
Jim says his number one is Ice Pirates.
Oh,
And then we have Gilman that just jumped in that said number 5 is The Mummy, the classic one.
oh.
Number 4, Young Frankenstein. 3, The Empire Strikes Back. Nice. 2, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Such a fantastic movie.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And then they've got Raiders at number 1. So you're number 2. Or is this your number 1?
This is my number one.
You're number 1. All right.
So it's hard because like I think this slot waffles. kind of goes back and forth from a few different things, kind of depending on like the overall mood. But something I keep going back to is the Brendan Fraser Mummy. Speaking of the Mummy, um, like to me, that's like the perfect action movie, the Brendan Fraser Mummy,
It
and like,
really is.
and I kind of wish they'd stopped Indiana Jones at Last Crusade, and then just put the energy into the Brendan Fraser Mummy franchise, because I think that like you know kind of covers the bases of what you want a hero to be, but also like giving everyone else in the party time to shine as well. Like there is for all intents and purposes, the Brendan Fraser Mummy is a D&D movie,
It
you know,
is. Yeah.
and there's a lot of movies out there that you watch and be like, why don't they just make a D&D movie like that? Which I love the new D&D movie. I had a blast watching. I saw it a couple times, but like there's so many movies out there that are like if you just reskinned it with like fantasy, it's a D&D movie. And Brendan Fraser Mummy definitely up there.
Nice. That is a great, great movie, and I am so glad to see him back in the spotlight in Hollywood.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah,
to have seen him fall out and just be like, what happened to him?
yeah.
And like to hear his story and everything's just like, oh, and ooh, the 88 Blob, Jim says. That's a good one too.
One of my favorite horror movies of all time. I would say I would dare even say in my top 5, top 10.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I would put it top 20 for me. I'm a weirdo when it comes to my
Mm.
horror movies. But then my number one, it's funny we said Carpenter. It's always going to be my number one, I think, is Halloween, the
Mm.
1978.
Yeah.
Um, that's another one that my dad just should never have let me watch as a kid. But I've got an undying love of horror movies thanks to my dad. um, and just the way the music and the lighting set the tension and everything in that movie is just it.
Oh, when Carpenter's on, he's on fire.
Yeah.
Just firing all cylinders. Magical, you know?
Yep. I mean, like, yeah, through the 70s and 80s with him, he could do nothing wrong. And then the 2018 Halloween hit, and it was like he was running on a treadmill and it just stopped on him and he fell. I mean, I liked the 2018 one, and then the
What
next
was
two kind of, yeah.
2018 one, which was
2018 Halloween, the
uh
the the remake, or not the remake, but the continuation of.
the trilogy one, right?
Yeah,
The one
yeah, the newer three.
thought the first one was great,
Yep.
and then they went back to the well. Like they could have just let they could and folks, I'm going to spoil this movie for you. So if you have not seen 2018 Halloween, earmuffs. Like when they left him burning in the building, and you have the Texas Chainsaw end where they're in the back of the truck and they're driving away. I was
Yep.
like
That's a
completely
wrap.
satisfied. That's it.
Yeah.
Done.
Yep.
Earmuffs
Um,
on.
yeah, I'm gonna spoil the next two kinda, so if you haven't seen those, earmuffs back on. The one thing I did like about the second Halloween was him coming out of the house being on fire with that Halligan tool
Oh
and
yeah,
just going ballistic.
yeah,
But when they got into the hospital and they're chasing that guy, I'm like, dude, that's obviously not this unstoppable serial killer. And the whole evil dies tonight chant that they got going on. And I was just like, what?
yeah. It went a little too far to the fan fiction,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and then like I don't know. That's a whole other conversation that gives me a headache. But go on.
But yeah, Halloween was my number one. Jim says Prince of Darkness messed him up as a kid. And then
Yeah.
Gilman said Poltergeist is the horror movie that screwed with me. Man, those fucking skeletons in the mud and everything. And I'm just,
Oh,
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah. I put we put an homage to that in one of our books.
Nice.
You'll find it. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. I'm glad you didn't spill the beans because I've still
No,
got
no, no.
plenty I've got to read.
Yeah, you'll.
Um,
It's one of those. You'll know.
I can't wait. So, one thing we haven't talked about that I don't know if we can without spoiling too much. Yeah, they were real skeletons. Because Gilman just put in there skeletons that were real, and Jim was like, "Were they?" And they were real skeletons. That they
Yeah.
were.
There's definitely things you can watch. I want to say maybe it's on Shutter, but there's like a thing where they talk about like the curse of Poltergeist. Um, and one of the theories is that like a part of it stemmed from them like using real skeletons, and like it kind of goes in weird directions and weird places, but like um, yeah, definitely there's definitely something to put in the Poltergeist series.
Yeah, that's. Which one was it? Was it 2 where they were in the high rise, or was that 3?
3, which they had to like regoof the ending because that poor girl died.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So you're a big horror fan.
I am.
Um, excuse me.
Something that didn't really happen until like my early 20s. Until like it's my very like early 20s. Um, can I tell you the movie that like absolutely like changed it all for me?
Absolutely. I've got
Uh,
one for me as well that.
yeah, I was dating a woman, and she had a sick horror collection, and she showed me Dead Alive.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and that was it. That was like this, and Dead Alive. Like there's Dead Alive jokes in my games too. Like Jackson, man, Hugh Jackson. I kick out for the Lord.
It's funny. This is gonna really probably make you laugh a little bit or be like, you're gonna be shitting me of what got me back into horror. Because like I was scared shitless of horror movies for the longest time after my dad like let me watch The Howling and The Shining and all this stuff as a kid, but was the Blair Witch Project.
Dude,
Um,
are you kidding me? Why
no,
do you think I wrote The Devil in New Jersey? Like that movie changed everything.
yeah, that's what got me back into horror. Um, I figured out before it hit theaters because of that curse of the Blair Witch show that they put out that they were full of shit. I was just spotting
I
too many inconsistencies
I didn't see that.
watching that. Oh, it's if you have Roku, they have it on the Roku channel, and I watched it the other night.
So I can find it.
And the
Curse of the
Curse of the
Blair
Blair
Witch.
Witch. Yep. Um, and I was watching that last night, spotting all the inconsistencies again, but I'm sitting there in my apartment. This is back in 98, 99, whenever. What year did that come out? That was in the 90s. It was like 98 or 99, I
Yeah,
think.
so Curse of the Blair Witch came out in '99.
Okay.
The Blair Witch Project was I'm actually in the IMDb right now. I want to say 96 or 97.
Okay. I thought The Curse of the Blair Witch was a TV show that they put on. That must have been the second movie then. But there was
1999. Yeah.
a show that they had that they aired before the Blair Witch hit theaters. And me and a bunch of my friends are sitting there watching this, and I'm like, they're not making sense with these stories that they're telling
Yeah.
through this. But you could feel the tension just building and building in my apartment as they're getting towards the end of this show. And I'm like, well, this is bullshit fake. These guys behind me, my buddies, are loving it. I let out this blood curdling scream, and I've never heard 5 grown men yell at such a high pitch as my buddies did that afternoon. But that's what got me back into horror was the Blair Witch.
It's a story I mention a lot. Is that like I saw it at the Franklin Theater in Nutley, which is a town away from where I grew up. I used to ride my bike there all the time. And when the Blair Witch happened, like what was the internet? Like you couldn't just like pull it up and debunk it like in a
Yeah.
second. And the studio, as the story goes, like hid the cast members away
Yeah.
um, for a bit before the movie actually dropped to really keep I mean, by the next week it was like kind of like whatever, but we saw it, and it was a tiny theater, and like it was terrifying because it was like, no one shot movies like that. No one was doing like,
No.
and not in the mainstream anyway, like where, this is found footage, and granted, this is like before any of us knew what the fucking cannibal Holocaust was, like, yeah, but like the Blair Witch, like it seemed like it could be real for one, a few weeks, and it was what was terrifying about it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and like you said, the internet was in its infancy, so you couldn't go to Snopes and be like, "Is the Blair
Yeah,
Witch real?" You know? And, God, Cannibal Holocaust, that's so funny that you said that.
yeah.
Um, it's funny to bring up found footage, though, because there's a game coming out. Are you familiar with Tommy Sunzenauer? He
I'm
made,
not.
he initially started with Blake Games out of Denmark, and he has made a game called Obscure that he dropped for Zine Quest. I think it was Zine Quest. No, it wasn't Zine Quest. That was Goblin Gonzo last year. That he put out in the fall
That's
called
a good idea.
Obscure.
Right.
That is going to be a found footage RPG,
Oh,
and
fun.
I can't wait. And he's got an open license on it, so I'm just like, ooh, that's gonna be a fun one to
Run
mess
wild,
with.
buddy. That's great.
Yeah. I just got to look at the time here. Okay, I still got a little bit to go. I do have to pick up my son around 10:30. So,
Yeah, I probably got to wrap up around 10
yeah.
myself. So
But yeah. I am so looking forward to this right
nice,
here.
man. That's awesome.
Um because it's like you said, it feels like a mix of Mad Max and so many other things. I thought for sure Mad Max might be in your top 5 with Children of Uma.
Well, like I said, it's kind of different every book, where the inspirato comes from, like, and again, like that was George's baby, and we both love Mad Max. Don't get me wrong, we fucking love Mad Max, but like, there's like, he was reading about the Dust Bowl, and like, there's a lot to each of these, where I think they're like kind of an amalgam of all the things that we grew up loving, and I think that's one thing I can say about 321 Action and the things that we write is that it's not just none of the books are just what they are on the surface, um, because they really, they're kind of a weird tapestry of like the things that have made us pop, and the things that we enjoy, like the things that like we think are exciting and that we hope that other people are going to think are exciting too. um and always like approaching it from a way where there's like, I like to, I mean, I think most people are familiar with the works of one R.L. Stein, but R.L. Stein has a thing where he says you write first act, the second act, and then a twist. um I kind of approach to something similar like that, where like I know what the finish is going to be, and then it's, going back and writing the first act, the second act, the twist, and then finding a way to like the connective tissue to bring it all together. And I think that connective tissue is just a constant love letter to the things that we grew up enjoying and the things that we enjoy to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it interesting that you like to start with an end, because we were talking about Levi. Levi likes to start with a title
Yeah.
and go from there. And I find it so interesting how everybody has a different starting point, but can all create such awesome work that you can't tell that you started at the end where he may have started with a title. And it's just so cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because like the Hotel Exorcist was a concept. Um, and, you know, I was a traveling salesman for a long time, and I was in like the actual, hitting the Mount Everest of my alcoholism while I was a traveling salesman. And I had like this weird thought, like, what if I just died? And I'm far away from anyone who I know and love. Um, just living in kind of a dangerous lifestyle as a traveling salesman, traveling alone for years. And it hits a point where, like, inspiration comes from weird spots. And I'm having like all these ideas, like not in like a self-harm kind of way, but I'm like, what if I died when I haunt this hotel? Like, who is gonna get rid of me if I'm still here? Like, they bring my body back, but I'm like, oh, I'm at the Holiday Inn Express for eternity. Like, you know, having a moment with it. And I thought about, like, with it, just like there are people who go and clean the hotel, there's got to be someone who have to clean up after the ghosts, who not Ghostbusters, but like, so I had the concept of like the traveling team of like non-denominational exorcists that go to hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts and help, remove the guests who stay far past their checkout. And so that was a concept. And then, like, so it, for me, that did start with the Hotel Exorcist. And when we did the pamphlet, when we did Only the Lonely, it was like, okay, I kind of knew what the finish was going to be, and I worked back from that. And with the new one, I knew what the opening scene was going to be. And Gio and I were like, the actual, like, the prologue should essentially be like an exorcism. Like, you start off with a bang. And then I knew what I wanted. I knew what I wanted the end of the second act into the finish to be. And then we've just been kind of building ever since. And like, so he's on his path, and like, he works differently than I do. And I'll go into the doc and I'll look and see what he's doing, or he'll send me a thing. He's like, I wrote this, and I'm like, fuck, that's great. Like, just, you know, just like turns it on its ear, and it makes it really, like, enhances. And he's great. Like, I couldn't ask for a better writing partner, to be quite honest. Like, as much as, like, we are partners in Hambone Publishing, we're partners in 321 Action. Like, I'm a fan of Gio Colazzo.
That's awesome. That is so cool. My son actually just texted me. I hate to cut it short, but I've got to
Oh,
go
it's all
pick
good,
him
man.
up.
Oh, it's all
Um,
good.
I have had so much fun talking with you.
Me too, man.
Uh, I'm gonna have to have you back on again.
I'd love
I,
to.
Jim and Gilman, thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks for being active in the chat. That is so cool. I've got to look here because we missed a bunch. It says there was a haunted house. They were talking about the skeletons. I want to make sure we don't skip this on them. And Skeletor was based on a Western corpse in a haunted house. There was a haunted
Amazing.
house attraction that frightened the designer of Skeletor. Fast forward, and the props from it
Amazing.
were on a movie set. One of the prop guys moved it and found out it was real. Whoa. Don't ask me how an outlaw corpse made it there. It was like an actual outlaw who was hung. Wow. Weird.
Oh, I love
That
learning shit
is,
like this.
yeah, that is so crazy. And awesome. And then they were talking about Goosebumps. And Jim says the best horror movie and best toys, Dogma.
What was it?
Yeah,
Buddy
Buddy
Christ?
Christ. Yeah, Buddy
Yeah.
Christ.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and
It was
thanks
my
for
pleasure.
joining